Welcome, marathon fans. We have some big news to talk about. This is Let's Run.com's Robert Johnson. And the big news just coming out of London, the world's greatest distance runner, the second fastest marathoner in history, Kenenisa Bekele, has pulled out of Sunday's race. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the weather. But first, let's hear from Kenenisa himself about why he's not running on Sunday.
I have bad news. I will not race on Sunday because I've tried my best to solve it. I had 2 weeks ago some minor injuries. We had really good training, and more or less in end of the 2 weeks, I really pushed a little bit hard training, and I had some feeling, the calf feeling, my left calf a little bit. Just I feel like overtrained, and after my physio checking about this, we try to solve, but it's really difficult to get enough, and it's really impossible to race on Sunday.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The great Kenenisa Bekele is not racing London. The anticipated matchup with Eliud Kipchoge is off. And it's got big implications for Sunday's race, obviously, but also about the future of Bekele's career. I mean, we want to talk about all of those things, but it's just kind of a bummer. My first impression is this is a bummer. Everybody had been talking about this matchup. Obviously, the two greatest marathoners of all time, or the two fastest marathoners of all time, the two greatest distance runners of all time, in many people's opinion. We're going to go head-to-head in London, and this would have been the first time they raced since Bekele had showed that he can run as fast as Kipchoge in a marathon course. So, John, you're the one who talked to both these guys this week. Are you surprised by the news? Just kind of give us some of your thoughts.
I'm not totally surprised because Bekele, if you look at his track record in the marathon, we've said this before, it's pretty inconsistent. I know his last time out, he ran 2:01:41 in Berlin, the number 2 time ever, but 5 of his last 8 marathons, he's either dropped out or he's withdrawn from. And he's withdrawn from 2 of his last 3, actually. He was supposed to run Tokyo last spring. We know that injuries have been an issue since he moved to the marathon. And it's just unfortunate. I mean, he didn't seem to be super optimistic in the press conference, but he also wasn't saying I'm hurt. It wasn't an indication that a withdrawal was forthcoming. I think more likely people sort of thought, well, if he's going to run poorly, he'll end up going with the pace halfway through and then dropping out. But like you said, well, then the biggest bummer about this, we've seen these guys race before, but we've never seen 2 2:01 guys in the same race. We've never seen Bekele coming off this race where for the first time we really think, hey, maybe he can compete with Kipchoge. And so that's really what we're missing out on this weekend.
I know most distance fans are sad, folks, but I'm quite excited about this. I got the email from the Virgin Money London Marathoners 11:05. I immediately went to my offshore betting site, put down $1,000 on Mozenet Garamu at 12-1. I'm feeling pretty strong now about my chance. If somehow Kipchoge screws up, I've got a good bet. I'm actually joking about that. On a serious note, though, John, I mean, you've said it over the last several months. Bekele and Kipchoge, we've never had a good race for them. Bekele always gets beat in the marathon. They've raced a ton in the marathon. It's never been close. One of your fellow journalist fans texted you after the press conference and said, I'll bet a month's rent that he's a DNF. Well, that was pretty good. He's a DNF. The question I have is this. Is this the end? Is this taps for Bekele's career? I mean, you know, he's 38. What's going to happen next year? Will he be? We're not going to have spring marathons. There's no London for next spring. I mean, I guess he could run a Boston or something like that. But will he be picked for the Olympic team? I sure hope so. But I mean, I guess the one good thing going for him is there's not that many races that these other Ethiopians can run to kick him off the Olympic team. But you know, I really, his run in Berlin was one of the greatest comebacks in the history of the sport. Let's hope he can have another comeback because it's just kind of depressing right now.
This is awful harsh, Robert. I mean, this morning I woke up, I'm more pumped for Bekele Kipchoge, and now a few hours later we've got "Is Bekele done?" graphics. I mean, I feel bad for the guy. I feel like it's a little cruel to be running something like that, but I do think it's a legitimate question because he's 38 years old, and like you said, we're not really sure if there will be spring marathons next year. Certainly not London, and I don't know. He did say he hopes to be back next year in London, and let's hope he can run against Kipchoge in the Olympics. But I don't know. I mean, if Berlin 2019 was the last time we saw Bekele in a marathon, what a marathon it was! Like you said, one of the greatest comebacks in the sport. But let's hope he's back in 2021.
And while we're talking about somewhat depressing news, let's talk about the weather. We have our weekly podcast, the Track Talk podcast. You can download it from your regular podcast places. But when we recorded that yesterday, I didn't think the weather would be a big issue. I'm now not so sure about that. Take a look at the dark sky forecast, my favorite app. The women's race is at 7:15. The men's race is at 10:15 local time. You're going to have a great temperature. You're going to be in the 40s, maybe the low 50s for the men. But there could be rain. It could be wet. Now, the good news is for the men's fans is look at this. The one time of the day it's not supposed to be raining in London is between 10 and 12. That's when the men's race will be run. But the pavement could be wet, stuff like that. The dew point's going to be fantastic, low 40s. But the other thing is depressing is look at this wind. We're talking 15 miles an hour for most of the races here. Quite high. And I've got another graphic here. Look at the wind gust. 10 a.m., 26 miles an hour, 29 miles an hour. So you're going to have people running on a wet pavement, potentially a small drizzle with 15 to 30 mile an hour winds. That is a little bit crazy to think about.
You could see some carnage over the second half of this race once the pack thins out. I mean, that's going to be extra incentive to run in a big group or a group for the first sort of half of the race. But once those packs string out and if they're running into the wind, you could see some major blowups.
So one question I had is when I saw the rain, I said, wait a minute, aren't these new shoes, the Vaporflies and the Next Percents, these super stack height shoes that have totally transformed the times in the marathon, don't they have a very slick bottom? Are people going to be struggling in those shoes? Could this be a big factor in the race? So I reached out to Jeff Burns, the biomechanical expert, the PhD student, the ultramarathoner at the University of Michigan. He's an expert on these shoes. I said, Jeff, what do you think? He sent me a fascinating email. I've got to find it here with some pictures of the shoes. And let's see here. Sorry about this. Look how big those stack heights are. You're that high up on a slick surface. Are you going to be able to get, any traction on the ground? The good news is he's like, look, the first version of the shoes, Bekele had a lot of problems in the rain when he raced Gaia Dolia in Berlin. He's like, there used to be a problem with one of the uppers, and it would take a lot of rain on it. Then they manufactured an upper on a 3D printer. And he's like, that one was a little bit better. He said now the shoes are great in the rain, and he doesn't think that there's any problem with the traction on these shoes as well. You can see they have a nice grip there, so he doesn't think that's an issue. What he was concerned about was this Adidas shoe here on the left. Look at that. He's like, this shoe has never been used really in wet conditions. He's not sure what the traction is going to be like for the Adidas athletes. Looks totally different. There's the Adidas shoe. So it will be an interesting thing. He doesn't think the Nike athletes will have a problem. He said this shoe is proven not to take on water. It's got good traction on the bottom. He's not worried about the Nike athletes. But again, we could have an issue where there's a shoe advantage for anyone in Nike. He just says the Adidas shoe is too unproven. He's never really run in it. He's not sure what to expect on that front.
Am I looking at that video wrong, Robert? Did that Adidas shoe have any traction on the bottom? It looked smooth to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it looks to me as well, which is pretty shocking. So, what do you?
Well, I mean, we're accused of being Nike haters and Nike shills by different spheres of our audience. I want to quit talking about shoes if possible, but it's just where the marathon is right now. So it is relevant. The one thing I know is that LA Kipchoge, he ran Berlin one year with the sole of his shoe flapping out, and this is before the super shoes. But he essentially ran 20 plus miles and won the Berlin Marathon with the sole flapping out. So if a guy can figure out to run, even if his shoes aren't working 100%, it's him. So I've got less concerns about him. And also on the men's side, I think all the top athletes are Nike. I don't even know who the Adidas athletes are. So I think maybe we're focusing a little time on something that's not a huge concern.
Yeah, Tamarat Tola, Vincent Kipchumba, Benson Kipruto, those are the three Adidas athletes at the top of the field. But I mean, Tola, he's won Dubai before. He's run 204 low. But I think the three, like the guys I view as the serious contenders to win after Kipchoge, which is Mozenek Geramu, Mule Wasahun, Shura Katada, maybe Cisse Lema, they're all Nike guys.
But, you said Tamarat Tola is a 204 flat guy. I mean, this is a big thing to me. I mean, this is the new age. The shoes make a difference. Those Adidas shoes look really flat. I mean, the carbon shoes that I run in, I don't want to mention the name right now, they have very slick bottom. I was running on wood this morning here in Baltimore, and it was like, I'm like, there's no way I would race in wet conditions in these shoes because I would be slipping and sliding. Now, mine are a little bit worn down. The bottom of mine kind of look like that Adidas shoe, which is interesting. So that just shoes are a story. We're going to have that question at the end of the race, no matter whether we like it or not. But Bekele is out. Kipchoge, obviously he was the big favorite coming in, probably even a bigger favorite now. But as I said in the regular podcast, I didn't think Kenenisa Bekele was the second man most likely to win this race. If Kipchoge, for the first time in his life, does not have an A marathon, I think that, obviously somebody else has to win. The most likely person to have a good day was not Bekele. The most likely person not named Kipchoge, in my mind, is Mozenek Geramu of Ethiopia. So if Kipchoge doesn't win, look for Geramu to be your winner of the 2020 Virgin Money London Marathon for the men.
Yeah, please just don't run to a gambling store and put $1,000 on Geramu like Robert suggested you do. Betting against Eliud Kipchoge, I'm just going to say, is always a bad idea.
Right, and we talked about this on our regular podcast. And before this, Kipchoge was a 2-1 favorite for the race, and Bekele was essentially 1-2, and Geramu 12-1. So Kipchoge was already a huge favorite. So that's going to skew even more his way. It'll be interesting to see kind of what the betting odds do. But like you guys, I didn't view Bekele as the number 2 choice to begin with. And it's just going to be very interesting. We've written this guy off so many times. I mean, we had that graphic at the beginning looking at his recent marathons. I mean, there's nothing to brag about except for the Berlin 201.41. And that was so shocking. But can you really write him that far off when come Olympics next year, that'll only be 2 years in the past? I think if anyone in the world could still put something together, it would be him. And in that race, this was Bekele like partially through that race. Actually, that's not him.
I can't see him. Well, then he's so far back at this point. I think he's behind the motorcycle or behind the pace car. But this is like deep into the race. He did get dropped by quite a lot and came back to run 201.
Did he get dropped to 3rd place? Did I forget that? No.
I think so. He was way back. He was like almost 20 seconds back of Legesse, I think, at 35K.
Oh, well, I mean, it's just amazing because I pulled up that graphic from a recap because I knew he got dropped in that race and still ran 201.41. So this guy has been written off for so long, and there's a reason he's widely regarded as the greatest distance runner of all time. But with next year, with no London Marathon in the spring, he likes the flat, fast course, although he is a great cross-country runner. But will he need to show something before Tokyo to get selected for the Ethiopians for the team? And I think he might. He didn't run the 2016 Olympics.
Yeah,
So,
he didn't run 2016. And that's interesting because back in 2016, people were writing him off then. And then he comes out of nowhere, gets third at London, and gets left off the Ethiopian team. And then he runs his 2:03.03 in Berlin, and he's back. But he pretty much didn't run a marathon in 2015. He started in Dubai and dropped out, and then we didn't hear from him for almost a year. So I think if you're the Ethiopians, do you put him on the team and just say he's Kenenisa Bekele, we're giving him a spot, he's run 2:01, when you have guys like Garamu, guys like the world champion Lisa DeCisa, guys like Bahanu Legesse, who's a 2:02 guy? I think you probably have to say we need to see something, and that might be maybe Tokyo in March is an option for Bekele. But given his track record, it is risky naming him to the team with the amount of DNFs and DNSs on his resume.
Or maybe the sad thing is if he doesn't make the Olympics, Bekele's motivated by big events. He may not be motivated, although I guess he could get ready for London, which will be October of next year as well. So that'll be doing it for pretty much this show. One thing I would remind everybody is if you want to get your Kenenisa Bekele, or excuse me, if you want to celebrate marathon greatness, you can get your 159.40 t-shirt from the letsrun.com store. Go to shop.letsrun.com. Again, that's shop.letsrun.com. You can celebrate the 159.40 shirt. Get one, support running, support Let's Run. Until next time, we'll see you guys.